September 30, 1974. It's just past midnight, and Chilean General Carlos Gonzalez and his wife Sofia are returning home after a night out in Buenos Aires, Argentina. The general gets out of his car to open their garage door, he takes a few steps, and then boom. His car explodes, and the general is blasted 13 feet in the air while his wife still in the car dies instantly. General Carlos and his wife had fled Chile in 1973, just a few days after the CIA had launched a bloody coup to overthrow Chile's democratically elected presidents. 1 year later, on October 6, 1975, during a late afternoon in Rome, Italy, Bernardo Leighton, a former leader of Chile's Christian Democratic Party, is taking a quiet walk with his wife. Suddenly, a man appears from the shadows and opens fires on Bernardo and his wife. Luckily, the couple survives, but Bernardo's wife is left permanently disabled due to her injuries. Another year later, on September 21, 1976, Orlando Letelier, a former Chilean politician, and his American colleague Ronnie Moffett are driving through Washington, D.C. They're just passing through Sheridan Circle when Orlando's car explodes. The two of them die almost instantly. In the 10 years between 1973 and 1983, the world experienced hundreds of mysterious assassinations and disappearances, and all the victims were connected to South American politics and power. Politicians were gunned down in public, activists and students were kidnapped on the streets, never to be heard from again, children vanished from their homes, re-emerging years later in a different country with different names, different passports, and completely different identities. In just a decade, hundreds of cases were opened at police stations around the world, but almost none of them would ever be solved. And it all started with the disappearance of two American citizens in Chile. This is Frank Teruggi, a 24-year-old student and journalist at the University of Chile in the capital of Santiago, and this is Charles Horman, a journalist and filmmaker who was living in Chile with his wife in the early 70s. In the days after the 1973 CIA-backed coup in Chile, both Frank and Charles disappeared. Their friends and family desperately tried to get a hold of them, but no one seemed to know anything about where they could be. The truth was, both Frank and Charles had been kidnapped by soldiers answering to a man named Augusto Pinochet, the US-friendly president of Chile that was installed by the CIA. After overthrowing Chile's democratic president with the help of the CIA, General Pinochet has started rounding up anyone who supported the old presidents and started dumping them in Chile's national stadium. Here, the prisoners, most of them being students, politicians, officials, and activists, were interrogated, tortured, and often killed. And Frank and Charles were unfortunately part of that group. Rounded up by Chilean soldiers, the two men had been taken to the stadium. Frank the student was seen beaten, electrocuted, and eventually killed with a machine gun. A few days earlier, Charles Horman had met a similar fate. His body was buried in the stadium wall. Now obviously, the American government immediately started an investigation, right? Two American citizens have been murdered by a foreign dictator. The CIA must have started putting together a special forces unit to retaliate right when the news leaked, right? No. America never launched any investigations, and never asked any questions, and never placed any pressure on the Chilean government to have anyone face justice, because it knew exactly what had happened to the two Americans. In fact, it was the US military intelligence who had given the Chilean soldiers the two men's locations. The US government had handed two American citizens, journalists, to General Pinochet's killers on a silver platter. Why? Because they were leftists, socialist-loving leftists. And in the 1970s, the CIA was funding and supporting a secret war against communism in South America, and even American journalists who supported communism were seen as the enemy. My name is Jake Tran. I make documentaries on money, power, war, and crime in my team. Subscribe for more. If you want to win $1,000 cash, you just have to be following me at Jake Tran and you're automatically entered. A few of you have won already. Watch out for fake accounts. I will never message you asking for money. And this is Operation Condor.
It all started on September 11th, 1973. That was the day a military dictator, General Augusto Pinochet, carried out a coup against Chile's democratically elected president with the help of the CIA. Salvador Allende had been elected president just 3 years earlier, and because of his socialist views, he had decided to nationalize Chile's very valuable copper industry, which basically meant he wanted to put Chile's copper mines under the government's control. The only problem was that Chile's copper mining industry had been monopolized by American businesses for years. And these American businesses didn't like the idea of losing all their money, equipment, and future revenue all because of one guy. So, they expressed their concerns to their connections in Washington. They told President Richard Nixon that Allende was definitely a communist, that communists had infiltrated his regime, that he was helping Fidel Castro, that if the US didn't act now, he was going to let the Soviet Union take control of all of South America. In other words, they played the domino effect card, and it worked like a charm. With everyone scared that Chile was about to turn red and hand over all those juicy copper mines to the Russians, it didn't take long for the CIA to get involved. For 3 years, they did everything they could to get Allende out. And finally, in September 1973, their plan worked. The Chilean military overthrew the democratic government. President Allende died in the process, and General Augusto Pinochet claimed the throne, and he would rule Chile with an iron fist.
Las Fuerzas Armadas y de Orden han actuado en el día de hoy solo bajo la inspiración patriótica de sacar al país del caos que en forma aguda lo estaba precipitando el gobierno marxista de Salvador Allende. La Junta mantendrá el poder judicial y la asesoría de la Contraloría. Las cámaras quedarán en receso hasta nueva orden. Eso es todo.
In one of his first acts as president, rounding up the leftists, activists, and all his enemies, and putting them in the ground. In just the first 3 weeks after the coup, more than 1,000 Chilean civilians were executed, and more than 14,000 were rounded up and questioned.
Porque aquí habíamos miles y miles de personas. Cuando dicen que habían 2.000, 8.000, no, aquí habían 15.000 personas. Ahí nos torturaban, nos pegaban, nos ponían corriente. A las mujeres las tenían en la piscina. No solamente las torturaban, les pegaban, sino que las violaban. Aquí nos pegaban unos tontos de goma que llaman, nos ponían unos trapos mojados en la espalda y nos pegaban. Aquí murió gente, mucha gente al estadio, incluso te golpeaban el portón ahí y venían con listas. Fulano, 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 se lo llevaban y los compañeros no volvían nunca más.
In the first year of Pinochet's rule, he rounded up another 130,000 people. Many of them ended up dead. General Pinochet knew that to stay in control of Chile, he would have to consolidate power and root out anyone who could stand up against him. He just had one problem. He couldn't get to all of them. You see, in the weeks following the coup, thousands of activists, politicians, and opposition leaders had fled to neighboring countries like Argentina, Bolivia, and even further out to Brazil, Colombia, and Uruguay. And in these countries, his enemies were basically untouchable. The governments of these other countries had no reason to arrest or kill them. And, from the safety of their new homes, all of those activists and politicians could make life hell for Pinochet. They could hold rallies, give interviews, or even organize a rebellion from just across the border. It was unacceptable. Something would have to be done to silence the runaways once and for all. And so Operation Condor was born. You see, Chile wasn't the only country being led by a military dictator. Uruguay, Brazil, Paraguay, and even Argentina were all under the control of their own murderous, power-hungry military dictators. And they had all discovered the same problem with their questioning and killing campaigns. The people they were after would all just hop the border and keep riling up anti-government support from the safety of their new homes. But what if all these dictators could agree to work together? What if they could collaborate to spy on, arrest, and extradite the communist activists their neighbors were looking for? Now, if a Chilean activist had fled to Argentina, he could be arrested in Argentina and sent right back to Chile to be questioned. Better yet, the Argentinian military could even do the questioning for them. And if an Argentinian activist jumped over the border into Chile, well, the Chilean government would happily return the favor. It was the agreement of every military dictator's dreams. Little did the South American dictators know, that the CIA had noticed their little arrangement and was about to make its own charitable contribution.
All the craziness that's been happening with the economy recently really shows you that you can't rely on anyone but yourself, not your employer and certainly not your governments. That is why it's more important than ever to be building up your side hustle, so that you can eventually turn that into your main source of income. And the simplest side hustle for most people to start off with is turning a skill you already have into a business by becoming a freelancer. Maybe that's offering translation services if you know 2 languages, or becoming a freelance writer or graphic designer or web designer, or maybe even as a virtual assistant. There's a lot of money to be made. The problem is actually getting a freelancing side hustle off the ground is really hard and overwhelming. How much do I charge? How do I get my first clients? The list just goes on and on. But lucky for you, that is where AppSumo comes in. AppSumo was created by my good friend Noah Kagan, who's a serial entrepreneur and employee number 30 at Facebook. And one of the ebooks AppSumo offers is called Freelancing and Consulting as a Side Hustle, and you gotta check it out. And don't worry, this ebook usually costs $29, but for my viewers, you're gonna get this for only $1. And it gives you everything you need to know to actually make money on the side with freelancing. You're gonna get blueprints for setting your rates so you can charge what you're worth, you're gonna get 9 proven techniques for landing your first client, and all the best practices for sending invoices, avoiding sketchy clients, managing your time, and so many more shortcuts. So if you've been waiting for a sign to start making money for yourself, this is it. But the thing is, this insane $1 deal is only available for the first 100 people who click the link below and sign up. So pause the video and click the link below to be one of the first 100 people to get this freelancing ebook for just $1. Thanks to AppSumo for sponsoring this video.
Officially, Operation Condor was supposed to be a transnational intelligence operation targeting Marxist subversives. Translation: a bunch of countries were going to work together to take out communists. But here's the thing. Just like the CIA had done to countless foreign presidents they wanted to overthrow, the members of Operation Condor also had a pretty liberal definition of communism. Accuse the government of murdering people? Communist. Write a paper on how the military dictatorship is ruining the economy? Communist. Join a rally for free and democratic elections? Surprise, surprise, another communist. Anyone who didn't bow down to the South American dictators of Operation Condor were immediately classified as communists. That way, arresting, torturing, or murdering them could kinda be justified, considering the whole world was fighting a war against communism anyway. And unsurprisingly, the US rather liked the idea of exterminating communists without all the hassle of investigations, trials, and all that jury of their peers nonsense. Operation Condor was offering them instant gratification. See a communist? Take him out. So, once the CIA picked up on Operation Condor and its goals, instead of blowing the operation wide open, warning the people they were targeting, or in some way trying to stop all the murdering and torturing, they thought, what can we do to help? Back then, almost all of the US's policies against communism focused on the domino effect. The theory that if just one country on any continent or region fell to communism, all its neighbors would eventually turn communist too. The only issue was, America had gone to war in Vietnam based on the domino theory, and it had not gone well with the American public. So, if the US government wanted to stop the spread of communism this time in South America, they were gonna have to do it in secret. And what better way to stop communism from spreading in South America than by supporting Operation Condor? That way, if any of it ever came out, the blame wouldn't fall on the CIA. It would fall on the murderous dictators. It was a win-win situation for both the CIA and the members of Operation Condor. And once those two groups started working together, they became nearly unstoppable. By the late 1970s, Operation Condor was in full swing. Never before had a group of South American countries worked so well together than when they were rounding up and questioning their enemies. They were communicating, sharing intelligence, and even conducting joint training operations together with their troops. Even the CIA was impressed with that level of cooperation. But then they ran into another issue. An operation of this size would need a lot of support. They would need a solid communication system between countries so they could quickly share information on people to arrest and kill. But they would also need training. After years of unrest, none of the member countries of Operation Condor really had the skills or the facilities to train death squads, assassins, and interrogators. After all, if they were going to do all of this without getting caught, they were going to need more than your everyday guerrilla fighter with no real training. And that's where the CIA came in. The CIA happily offered the Operation Condor members their very best communication gear that happened to be wiretapped. This would allow each Condor country to communicate quickly and easily with the others, while also giving the CIA unlimited access to the messages they were sending. So not only did the CIA know exactly how many people were being eliminated, they knew who was going to be targeted next, and gladly stood back and did nothing. But that's not all, because the militaries of all the Condor countries still needed training. And who better to teach them how to interrogate, kidnap, and kill than the US military? And so, the School of Assassins was born. Its actual name was the School of the Americas, and it was first opened under that name in Panama in 1963. Basically, the School of the Americas was supposed to be a joint training base where America's allies in South America could come for high-level military training from the American Army. But that's not what really happened. In reality, South American soldiers from Condor countries were being trained in enhanced interrogation and how to blackmail, kidnap, drug, and execute their targets. In fact, some of South America's most violent dictators, death squad members, and assassins graduated from the School of Americas in the 70s and early 80s. And the methods the Condor soldiers ended up using were merciless. But we can't go into depth here or else this video will get demonetized, which is why you should pause the video and click the join button below for our more controversial documentaries we can't release to the public. Nothing the Operation Condor countries did to their enemies was too gruesome or too cruel for America to support. These were noble, capitalist dictators ridding the earth of vile communist scum. Obviously, the ends totally justified the means. This included things involving helicopters and pregnant women that, again, we can't go into much detail about. Operation Condor was probably one of the worst examples of America's tunnel vision when it came to communism. Anything was justified as long as the communists were suffering for it. And by the late 70s, the group of Condor member countries had grown with the addition of Brazil, Ecuador, and Peru. And as time went by, Condor started looking more like the Purge rather than an American-backed intelligence operation. In 1980, the Condor members supported a military coup in Bolivia. As a result, General Luis Mesa took power using money he received from Bolivian traffickers of a certain white powder. As a thank you for Operation Condor's support, he opened Bolivia up to Condor soldiers and turned a blind eye as thousands of people were being questioned and eliminated as a result. In Argentina, Operation Condor's missions were even more brutal. Under the military dictatorship of Jorge Videla and with $50 million in financial assistance from the American government, Argentina waged its dirty war against the new president's opponents. In the 7 years that the war lasted, more than 30,000 people were killed or disappeared forever. In total, Operation Condor resulted in the deaths of at least 60,000 people that we know of. The actual number could be way higher, but none of this mattered to America or the CIA. They were just happy to see every last South American socialist, leftist, and communist running for their lives. US Secretary of State Henry Kissinger even congratulated Argentina for wiping out communist terrorists, and even attended the 1978 Soccer World Cup in Argentina as President Videla's personal guest. It looked like Operation Condor was unstoppable. But then, with one small mistake, one tiny misstep, Argentina bumped over the domino that would bring the entire operation to its knees. You see, all that killing and kidnapping Operation Condor was happily carrying out was starting to have a very negative effect on the member countries' economies. The rich and well-educated were fleeing to North America and Europe to escape becoming the next victim. And those who were too poor to run were getting sick and tired of living in fear. And no one felt the pressure of a popular uprising more than Argentina. In a last-ditch effort to keep the masses at bay, President Videla invaded the Falkland Islands. He hoped that by reclaiming land most Argentinians believed belonged to Argentina, he could drum up a little more support among the people he was planning to eliminate. The Falkland Islands had been a British colony for 90 years when Argentina invaded. Unsurprisingly, when it came to a war between Britain's powerful navy and Argentina's guerrilla fighters, the British won. Humiliated by his easy defeat and threatened by thousands of protesters in the streets, Jorge Videla was forced to allow elections to take place in 1983. 1983 became the year that brought democracy back to Argentina, but Jorge Videla's fall also meant the end of Operation Condor. Inspired by what happened in Argentina, thousands of people across South America started calling for free elections. America and its puppet dictators had to admit defeat. 1983 marked the end of Operation Condor, and in the end, these South American dictators were finally forced to face the consequences of their actions. Most of the big players in Operation Condor ended up spending decades in jail. But as you can guess, the American politicians and intelligence officials that approved and supported Operation Condor continued to enjoy their comfy lives, never facing any consequences. Operation Condor taught America and the CIA something very important. As long as you have a good reason for doing something, you can get away with anything. All the CIA and US government had to do to justify supporting Operation Condor was point out that the member countries were fighting communists. And suddenly, murder, kidnapping, and enhanced interrogation were all perfectly okay. So when the time came around for America's next global offensive, the War on Terror, they used the exact same tactic. Between 2001 and 2009, hundreds, if not thousands of Arabic men and women, some suspected terrorists and some completely innocent, were enhanced interrogated by the CIA. While America was accusing countries like Syria, North Korea, and Iraq of human rights violations, the CIA enhanced interrogated prisoners in secret prisons or black sites all over the world without ever charging them with a crime. And the stuff that happened in these black sites makes Operation Condor look like a kid's birthday party. That's how evil it got. The Black Site program was one of the darkest periods in America's history, but no school or university will ever tell you the full story. Which is why we've made a full-length documentary on exactly how the CIA's Black Site started, how the CIA used them, and why it's probably still happening around the world today. But here's the thing, YouTube is really good at demonetizing sensitive or controversial content, which would definitely include a video about enhanced interrogation. So instead, we've released it as a private documentary available only to members of this channel. All you have to do to get access to this documentary right now, as well as all the videos we've already published on the CIA's mind control program, the roots of Middle Eastern terror, and even a deep dive on our friend Jeffrey Epstein, is to click that join button below. People pay tens of thousands of dollars every year to universities only to leave not knowing anything about how the world really works. But by becoming a member, you get all of this priceless information for just $5 a month. And we promise you, it's way more entertaining than university lectures. Plus, there's also a refund policy unlike most YouTube memberships. So if you join and you don't think it's worth it, email us within your first month of joining and we will personally refund you for your first month. After your first month, there is no refund. So scroll down and click that join button below right now.
Back at it again with anchoring the CIA. If you're new here, my name is Jake, and this is one of the biggest channels on YouTube for documentaries on money, power, war, and crime. So if you enjoyed this one, we make multiple videos just like this for free every single week, so you should subscribe with the button below and click that join button too. If you want shorter versions of these videos, you can follow me on Facebook, and if you want a chance to win $1,000, you can follow me on Instagram. Not sure how much longer we're going to be running that giveaway, so get in while you can, but that is going to wrap it up. As always, stay dangerous out there, and I will see you guys in the next one.